Good morning, Santa Clarita. You're listening to your hometown station, KHTS AM 1220. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond The Courtroom. Today, we're going to be talking about your friend, the Fifth Amendment, how it protects you, how it's critical to the economy, and even we'll learn a little bit about history. So, before I do that, though, I'd like to bring in the guy on the board, Mike Dowler. Mike.
Good morning, Wade. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Wow, this sounds so different.
I know, right? Well, we're transmitting live from a brand new facility on downtown Newhall on Main Street. It is wonderful in here.
Good morning, Old Town Newhall. This is beautiful.
That's right. No, I feel like we're in a fishbowl a little bit. We are windows on all four sides so that people can see how the sausage is made on the Wade Beyond the Courtroom.
Well,
it's delightful, I must say. It was served well with a nice Chianti. So, Mike, how was your week?
Pretty good. Not bad at all.
Good. Are you friends with the Fifth Amendment? That's what we're going to be talking about today.
I think it's important. I think everybody has their own interpretation of it.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
Certainly, when it's convenient, they try to spin it in their direction.
That's right. Well, let's do a little bit of history lesson about the Fifth Amendment. So,
sounds good.
James Madison, one of our founding fathers, actually introduced it into the Constitution, and it's based on a document traced back to something that's called the Magna Carta, which I believe is a Brazilian card game. No, it's not. The Magna Carta is something in 1215, and it's Latin for the Great Charter. And it was a document in England that provided for peace between the king and some rebel bandits, or rebel barons, I should say. And so that's where the Fifth Amendment came from. Now, what is your understanding of anything in the Fifth Amendment, if anything at all? I put you on the spot right there.
I plead the Fifth.
I know, right? There it is. Yeah. Well, that's what everybody knows is I plead the Fifth, basically. And the part of that, which is what everyone knows, is that nor shall a person be compelled in any case to be a witness against himself. Now, the reason why this is so important, and actually the Fifth Amendment, although some people think that constitutional law might be slightly boring, I actually think it's very exciting, especially on the day after the 4th of July.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, basically, the issue with the Fifth Amendment is that when you don't have to testify against yourself, the reason why this is important, because let's say, Mike, that the Wade Beyond the Courtroom, that we start to take some political views here that we disagree with the current government, whatever government that is,
right.
Be it the Republicans, be it the Democrats. We start to be like firebrand. You and I start to become these political firebrands, which is unlikely, but it could happen. We could get excitable,
I hope not.
Right?
Yeah.
And the government suddenly starts to get upset with what we're doing here at KHTS AM 1220, your hometown station, in the new studio on Main Street in Newhall. Well, the government can't just come in and basically force us to talk about what we're doing here. It can't say, hey, you need to explain what you're doing. We want to know what you're doing. We have an absolute right on the Constitution just to say exactly what you just said and say, I'm going to plead the Fifth.
Right.
And so a lot of people think, well, that stuff doesn't apply to me. I don't commit crimes. But actually, the Fifth Amendment is almost more important for everyone else outside of the criminal justice system for that very reason I just described. It links closely with the First Amendment in terms of freedom of speech, and then the government can't just come in because it doesn't like what you're doing. Right? So you and I can talk about whatever we want, which is some First Amendment issues, but the other thing, though, is that we don't ever have to worry about the government coming in and saying, explain yourselves. We'll be like, you go explain yourself, government. I think that's like a legal argument, right?
Can be.
Right, it could be, absolutely. So, and then people have talked about it in a criminal case. So I used to be a prosecutor, right?
Right.
And so in a criminal trial, when you do a criminal trial, you can never talk about if a defendant remain silent. You don't have to comment on the fact that they didn't say anything to the police. You can't comment anything with regards to that if they don't testify during a criminal trial. That's a huge no-no. Absolutely do not do that. And guess what I did the first year I was a prosecutor?
You did that.
One time. I very, very collaterally, on accident, got a little carried away once in a closing argument, and it was a I will say, on scale of problem in a trial from small to large, it was a large problem. So it's taken very seriously by the courts. I had a very nice talking to by my supervisor.
So a slap on the wrist, basically?
Well, I didn't, it would just cause problems for my trial, but I didn't get any. It was an inexperienced lawyer. I was 25 years old. It was literally like my first job out of law school, so which makes it fun to know that I was in charge of how much jail time people were going to receive, right? But anyways, it was a big deal, and I always am very fond of that memory simply because now as a defense attorney and also just as a citizen, those issues are important. That stuff is taken very seriously by the criminal justice system.
Well, you see a lot of high-profile situations in the news as well where people that are on the hot seat plead the Fifth, and
Right.
It's kind of like their way out.
It is, but you have to do it correctly. You can't, what a lot of people don't know is that you can't just pick and choose what you're going to plead the fifth on. So let's say you can't say, well, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to answer that question. Oh, I don't like that question. I'm going to plead the fifth on that question. If you answer any substantive questions during your, under oath, then you can waive your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. So I think the Lois Lerner case, I think they were talking about her, is that there's an argument that she did that when she went in front of Congress, because I don't know what lawyer was advising her, but very inartfully done.
And didn't she turn around and resign or retire or something?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think she's with the IRS anymore, but the issue now is, though, is can you go back and say, well, we're going to compel her to testify because she waived her Fifth Amendment right? There's so much politics going on with those IRS issues as well, though. It's not as cut and dried as, oh, well, let's just get her back here and question her, because there's a lot. And to be honest with you, I'm not super versed in that case. I just know that as an issue of what we're talking about today with the Fifth Amendment, that was an issue what she was talking about, because she answered some questions and then didn't, and then took the fifth on others.
Before we go to break, if a defendant or person in question pleads the fifth, does it make the prosecutor's job that much harder? Is that a big hurdle for them?
That is a great transition into the next segment. Absolutely it does, because a lot of people don't even know to plead the fifth. And so if a lot of cases, people basically just confess because they don't know that they don't have to talk. So we'll get a little bit more into that when we come back from the break.
Sounds
You're
good.
Listening to AM 1220 KHTS. I am Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. You're listening to AM 1220 KHTS, your hometown station. I am Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. Before we left at the break, we were talking about your friend, the Fifth Amendment. And Mike, you made a really good point. You said, is the prosecutor's job harder if the person exerts their Fifth Amendment right? Well, two things, yes. One, if the person exerts their right before, during the investigation phase, and let's say the detectives are contacting them or investigators are contacting them, and they say, you know what, I'm not going to talk to you, just talk to my lawyer, then the person typically does not confess in that area. So yes, number one, it can make an investigation harder. And number two, it can also make it harder during trial, because think of it this way. A prosecutor has been very seasoned usually. They've been doing the job for a long time. And a person that's accused of a crime probably has never testified in front of a jury, a judge, and it being asked questions by a skilled prosecutor.
Right.
So if they say, I take the fifth, then they're not giving themselves subject to that. Whereas if they're going to go, no, I'm going to answer the questions, then they have to face a very skilled and talented prosecutor usually. So it does make the prosecutor's job, I should say it makes it easier if the person testifies.
Okay, got it.
So, and the thing is, what's really interesting about that too is that...
Well, and again, Lois Lerner, that's a super high profile case. I mean, the whole thing, that's the IRS. That's got the biggest thing you could think of.
Absolutely, but Lois Lerner probably has never testified in front of Congress before, or a very limited amount. I would assume that that's incredibly stressful to do that, even if you're a very skilled person. I'll give you an example with something that's kind of interesting. So one reason why I like to do the show is because I like to give access to the law to people, because very rarely do people get to just kind of have the law talk to them in a normal way. You know what I mean? It's without jargon, without legalese, even though we did read the Constitution today, but it's after the 4th of July, so It's a special day. And so, they want access to it. But even people who have legal training mess this up sometimes. I'll give you an example. When I was a prosecutor, or even as a defense attorney, I come across cases sometimes where lawyers are accused of doing something improper, right? Be it a criminal case, whatever. And what's really interesting about lawyers is lawyers always try to talk themselves out of the situation, even though they know they don't have to. And so lawyers are actually some of the worst offenders of not just keeping quiet, which I find fascinating. And it was really interesting to me the first time I came across a case like this, because this guy should know better. He's an attorney. He had to actually take a constitutional law class. But sometimes lawyers, we like to talk, I guess, and so they try to talk themselves out of that situation. So that's why it's a more amusing application, is that I think detectives get excited when they get to investigate.
Well,
lawyers,
and lawyers understand the system as well.
You would think,
Yeah.
but they're the worst offenders, because it's they almost know just enough to be dangerous to themselves, because if they're so used to the system and then suddenly, let's say, an officer is asking them some question because maybe they had too many drinks at a party or something, or they're collaterally involved, which means they're just kind of involved in something that they don't even know about, they can really get themselves into some hot water if they answer questions and they just think they can talk themselves out of it.
So let me ask you this then. If I'm a defendant, hypothetically I'm a defendant, and I decide under your counsel to plead the fifth, does that buy time, or are there cases where an attorney will say, just get up and tell your story, and then the defendant says, wait a second, I'm not going to.
Right.
Pleads the fifth, not consulting you first.
Well, the interesting thing is that you can never force a client to not testify. So you can advise them. Let's say we're in a trial. There are a lot of different stages to a criminal case. So let's say that we're in a trial, right? And you advise your client, listen, I don't want you to testify. There's this, and this reason. It's better for us if you just don't say anything. But the person, they've watched a lot of movies. They want to have their day in court. So you can't force that person to not testify. That person has an absolute right to even ignore their lawyer. And usually, though, what will happen is the judge will advise them and say, you should listen to your attorney because he or she is a skilled attorney. They have a reason why they're telling you to do that or not do that, and go from there. Another interesting sort of debate that you have as a defense attorney when you're counseling someone is in the investigation phase. So, like, let's say that you have a client that the police or detectives are interested in for some reason, and they call up your client, and your client says, hey, listen, let me talk to my lawyer, and we'll figure out what we're going to do. Some lawyers will do what's called basically a proffer, which happens a lot in federal court, where they'll take your client in. The client will basically spill the beans and everything that they know, and then sometimes that will do one of two things. That will either give them sort of credit for cooperating, or rarely, in my experience, from talking to other people, is that the detectives will then stop being interested in that person because they believe what that person has to say. That is an infrequent in my experience. I don't ever let my clients talk to anyone ever. I always talk for them, but some attorneys differ on that, and so it gets real. It's a gamble either way. No matter what you do, it's always a gamble. You just have to make the best decision that you can.
And again, that's the Fifth Amendment is one of the biggest rights we have in this country.
Well, yeah, and that's really interesting in terms of for a couple things, not just on a personal level, but there's many. Everyone always thinks of that it's the Fifth Amendment only talks about your right to remain silent, and in fact, there's a lot of rights in there. There's something that's called the due process right. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
No.
But there's a section in there that says, nor shall any person nor shall any person be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So basically, all of the issues that you hear about the due process clause and our rights within the due process clause all come out from the Fifth Amendment. And we'll talk a little bit more about that because it has some actually huge impacts into the whole country and economy when we come back from the break.
Okay.
You're listening to AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. Welcome back, Santa Clarita. I can't even talk today, Mike. What happened there? I had a little July 5th impact on my enunciation. Santa Clarita. Thank you. Welcome back.
I think the aroma of fireworks smoke is.
I'm overwhelmed by our new
hanging
studio
heavy.
all of
Yeah.
a sudden. Yes. Well, you're listening to your hometown station, KHTS AM 1220. This is Wade Beyond the Courtroom, Santa
in our
Clarita.
new studio.
Yes, that's right. So we've been learning about your friend, the Fifth Amendment. We've learned about how it can protect you. We've even got a little bit of history in today, Mike. But now we're going to talk a little bit about how the Fifth Amendment is critical to our economy. We talked a little bit about the due process clause before we left, about how any person shall not be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And the reason why this is very important to basically the entire economy around us, because think about this. Let's say that if the government could just come in and take your house away from you anytime it wanted to, or take your business away from you anytime you wanted to, or even come in and take this radio station and just say, no, we're going to nationalize this radio station without any kind of protections in the courts, people wouldn't be buying houses, investing in businesses, or doing radio stations, right? Because in that case, why would you do that when you know the government could come in and take it at any moment?
Right.
And so that's why the Fifth Amendment is not only really important to you if you ever are in trouble for something. The vast majority of people never get in trouble for anything. But it's important because it's one of the cornerstones, in my opinion, of how we can have such a wonderful and diverse economy where we can have entrepreneurs who will try to do whatever they can to grow their business because they don't have to worry about the government coming in and taking it away from them. They have protections in the court. So that's why the Fifth Amendment is absolutely one of my, I know it's a weird thing to say, but it's one of my favorite amendments. If you had, amendment trading cards, it would be my most coveted one. Like a Fifth Amendment.
And we kind of use it every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's
normal
in
life.
It's this protections basically are given to us every single day because we don't have to worry about most of the time the government coming in and just doing things without a reason, basically, is the simplest way to describe it. So not only do we not have to, we can tell someone from the government to go pound sand, I don't want to talk to you, they have their own mechanisms for dealing with that. But it also, too, is that, they can't just come in and take the studio away from us because they don't like what we're saying.
Yeah.
And look, again, we're not a political firebrand show. Maybe we should be. Maybe we should just start throwing.
I don't know.
We'll alternate. 1 week we'll be Republican. The next week we'll be Democrats.
I plead the fifth.
That's right. We'll be libertarians the week after that. So, but that is one reason why, like, land ownership, investment, business, all protected by the Fifth Amendment and due process. So another little interesting thing about the Fifth Amendment is, have you ever heard of double jeopardy?
Yes.
Okay, so double jeopardy is basically that in the specific language is, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life and limb. It's almost like a poem. It's like that's one of the more poetic parts of the Fifth Amendment. And to put that down is that in a criminal case, let's say that I accuse you of something and I take you to trial for bank robbing. Mike robs a bank, okay?
Wow.
And just make sure that you stash the money somewhere, right? But the Fifth Amendment doesn't protect you on that for the government taking that back. But let's say that they try you and you're found not guilty because you have a wonderful defense lawyer. Let's say that someone, like I'm defending you and I do a masterful job and you are acquitted of that crime. Even though there's video of you and DNA of your fingerprints, or DNA and your fingerprints all over the crime scene, somehow the jury says, nope, we're not going to convict Mike on this. Now, the government, under this clause of the Fifth Amendment, cannot come back and try you again. You're once you have been acquitted, you can't come back and be tried again. Now, there are some little minor things in here, like, so did you know that you may beat a case on a state level, but then the feds can come in sometimes and try you on something. So that gets complicated. Yeah, people don't know that. Also, too, is that, have you ever heard of a hung jury?
Yes.
Okay. A hung jury basically is when they can't decide. They're deadlocked. They have 12 people in the box. They say 6 of them say yes, 6 of them say not guilty, and so they just can't go forward. The government then can come try you again. I think there's a case in Louisiana where they're like on their 8th or 9th trial for this one guy down there for a murder, and they just can't get a conviction, but the government can keep retrying him until they get a flat-out acquittal or until they get a conviction. So typically, though, that's very unusual. Usually they may...
Well, because the expense.
Yeah, it's very expensive. Yeah. So that case is a pretty heinous case down there, though, so I think that's basically why they were doing that. But yeah, so that's... I mean, these little things that we all take for granted that we don't even think of, they all come from this simple document that's, obviously the Constitution. The Fifth Amendment is a lot that's in there between the due process issues, the issues with regards to being compelled to testify against yourself, that you can't be tried more than once. There's a lot in there. And it's funny, one reason why I really enjoy doing the show is because I want to make sure that people can have access to different aspects of the law. It's almost like you're at a cocktail party and you have a very friendly lawyer and you'd like to say, hey, I'd like to ask you about the Fifth Amendment, right?
Right.
Most of the time, the lawyers will be nice and they'll try to remember back in their brain from law school about that issue. But that's why in the upcoming weeks, what we're going to do, Mike, is we're going to start bringing in some lawyers that do other things, because I have a little news flash for you. I actually don't know everything. Did you know that? So
you sure fooled me.
I know, right? So basically what's going to be happening, I'm very excited about the format that we're going to be employing in the upcoming months, is we're going to start to bring in lawyers from different areas of practice, of stuff that I don't do, so that we're going to start to just try to break stuff down for normal, so that just kind of normal language can understand it without jargon. We're going to get real comfortable. We're going to have them come in. They can't wear a suit. I'm going to tell them no suit. So it'd be like no suit, no service kind of thing.
Did you hear that, Kyle?
Yeah, right, exactly. And yeah, we're just going to break down some topics over the next few months, and I'm really excited about it because I think we want to make sure that we give access to everybody.
And we do have a no suit and tie policy here.
We do.
Well.
Yeah, that may change if we move to it during the day of the week, maybe, because I'll have to come from court and I won't have time to change. But yeah, we want to be real loose and just have people be able to get access to the information, because that's basically how we all make good decisions and learn.
That being said.
All right. Well, listen, what a great show. We broke in the new studio today. I'm so excited about when this is going to start, how this is going to get built out, and just maybe we'll have a following. We'll just have a crowd of people out there all experiencing Wade Beyond the Courtroom.
And we're in a very historic building. This is the old Newhall Hardware building.
It's
so
great.
A lot of history there.
Yeah, really
and
good.
There'll be more on that, I'm sure, as we go.
Well, really excited. So, well, thanks for a great show today, Mike. You've been listening to AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom.